Welcome to another edition of the Great Card Quest. We have been fortunate enough to be able to be in the basement of Doug's house in Northwest Indiana. Wonderful man cave, great place. They're watching the NCAA tournament, so you may hear some cheering in the background. It's not for me, trust me. It's for the game. So what we're going to do today is, and let me give you the background. I know you've probably hopefully seen the previous two shows, but we are covering cards 75 to 124 today of the 1971 Topps Black Beauty baseball set. I am building the entire set in PSA 7 plus. There'll be some 8s sprinkled in to the mix, but it'll be mostly 7s. And at this time, I'm probably bumping about 580 out of 752 of the basic set, and then there's a master set of 761, which will cover some cards today that are kind of in that master set, and I'll explain the difference. But the 71 set's kind of a tough set to build. There's not a ton of them out there. I have a lot of information on some of the cards. I'm not going to do all 50 cards, so we'll be here for 4 hours. But I'm going to do a few of them that are pretty cool. And then I'm going to tell you the pop counts, population, all that kind of stuff, if you're interested in that. So, but if you're not interested in that, you're probably not watching this anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right, so we're going to start with, as I do every show, just with the overall numbers, so you guys know what's going on. So, as I said before, there's a total population of PSA graded. Of course, there's other grading systems, Beckett and all that kind of stuff. But of PSA, there's 299,286 cards graded total. Okay, there's 107,000 sevens, 120,000 plus 8s, 9,397 9s, and only 242 10s. And there's a few 10s in this here that I'll give you the price on as we go. I looked those up. I use vintage card pricing. It's very cool. So that's the overall set. I always like to give the numbers so we know we're kind of relative speaking, you have something to frame it around. So as you know before, we went up to card 74. Some neat stuff in there. This is a kind of a packed, chock full group of 50 here. You should recognize some names. And my caveat is, these aren't all superstars. There's a few I throw in that are just cool. I remember them from a child memory, who knows. Or they just have a cool name, and I bring it up. So, but that kind of add the fun to it. So, first one we're going to go over is number 78, Mr. Jim Spencer. And you'll see a blow up of the card now here. So we'll put Jim right over here for you. So Mr. Spencer, there's 133 sevens, 158s, 6 9s, and 0 10s. Not everyone has a 10 because there's only 252 of them of PSA. So Jim Spencer, once again, not a great player, but he just always seemed to be on TV. If you remember watching baseball back then, he was the first baseman with the Angels, amongst other teams. Just kind of a cool guy, Jim Spencer. The next one, and I bring this up for personal reasons because is card number 79, a 7. That's Wade Blasingame, and you'll see a close-up of that picture. Wade was a pitcher for the Astros, amongst other teams. Nothing notable about him, but his son is an actual baseball scout for, I can't remember the team, but I've actually met his son and spoken to him because I was a former NFL agent and current, and so basically I try to dabble into baseball. So I met his son, so that's why he's in this. And numbers-wise, there's 77 sevens, of course, 101 8s, 5 9s, and 0 10s. So that's Wade. Now, hence the hat. Any Cub or White Sox, based in Chicago here, obviously southeast side, next to Highland, but in Illinois. But Mr. number 80 card, Bill Melton. All right, now if you're a Cub or Sox fan, well, I should say a Cub fan or Sox fan from the that era, everybody loved Mr. Melton, card number 80. So I am a Cub and Sox freak, so whenever I see a Cub or Sox, I get crazy. He was a former third baseman. He signed right out of high school, which is kind of neat. He was the first White Sox player to lead the American League in home runs. So that's a little trivia for you there. They called him Belton Bill, and eventually went to the California Angels, and eventually the Cleveland Indians. He became a community representative for the White Sox and a television analyst. So Belton Bill was cool to watch as a kid. I kind of remember him at the end of his career, but very cool. Next one, this is one of those purely name-only guys, but Felix Milan. I do not have the 7 yet. I'm acquiring that, but I do have a complete raw set of the cards, so I have every card, just whether it's in a PSA 7 or not. So Felix Milan, just love the name. That's all I got. Not even going to give you the statistics on that one. Another one that you'll remember, once again, nothing really notable he did, but I kind of remember him sticking out as a kid. He is card number 84, and by the way, Felix Milan was 81. Card number 84, pitcher from the Athletics, Marcel Lashman. I don't remember how to say it, but I just remember seeing him all the time as I was a kid. He was on the A's. He was a pitcher. And it was 103 sevens, 109 eights, 7 nines, and 0 10s of Mr. Lashman. All right. Now we get to a little more notable name here. You may recognize the name. This is card number 89, Ken Brett. Yes, the older brother of George Brett. And he kind of hung with George towards the end of his career. So Mr. Ken Brett, he set a major league record for a pitcher as a home run as he hit 4 consecutive starts while pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies. So that's amazing to hit 4 home runs. I guess he was a great hitter. He probably could, and you can see that because his brother George Brett obviously almost hit 400 one year. So George is the man. He pitched 14 years. He had a decent career. Let's face it, he's most notable for being George's brother. But he was a comparable or a competent pitcher and had a really good career. He ended up hitting 262 with 10 home runs and 347 at bats. So there's actually players that don't do that well. So gotta love George. And here we got the next one, Joe Pepitone, card number 90. He's a Cub. He wasn't great, but as a kid, you always love seeing Joe Pepitone. He played a dozen years. They called him Peppy, just for that people to know. He succeeded Moose Skowron. Now we're talking; these are old cards. I mean, Moose Skowron. That name sounds like a wrestler, but it was actually a baseball player. He had and then he replaced Moose Skowron, and then he succeeded Moose Skowron, and he ended up replacing Ernie Banks. So that's big shoes to fill for Mr. Pepitone, but you gotta love him. Ex-Cub. All right. Next, number 91, Bob Lemon. Kind of remember that name. He was a manager, played way back in the day, but he in 1948 he no-hit the Detroit Tigers, so he has some claim. But he was a good manager. You always hear the name, and you gotta love anyone with the name Lemon. Let's face it. Now here's a name everybody should remember. This is card number 95, Louis Tiant. He was a hell of a pitcher. He was amazing. He was one of the most dominant pitchers in the 60s and 70s. He had 6 different pitches, and he threw a knuckleball, which a lot of people don't realize. His dad was a very famous player, and he passed that along. And what happened was he played in Cuba, and they wouldn't let him back to Cuba. So basically the Indians purchased his contract, and they loved him. So, and he had a great career. 3 All-Star selections, American League shutout in 1966 and again in 1968. So Louis Tiant, he was awesome. I hope you remember him. Oh, and just numbers-wise, for him, there's 167s, 134 eights, 6 nines, and 1 10. So he's one of the 252 10s. And his card sold in 2009, because I use vintage card pricing, as I said, for $1,009 in 2009. So if you got the 10 in your crawl space, it's worth about $1,000 right now. So, but it hasn't sold for almost 14 years. So whoever's got that 10 is hanging on to it, like they call it in the NFT world, diamond hands. So, all right, next. Once again, a defensive specialist, card 99, Mark Bellinger. He was cool. Just remember him as a kid. He used to be he played for the Orioles. He was a shortstop. Now imagine, it was him and Brooks Robinson on the left side of that infield. So good luck getting a hit through those two. I mean, you had to really get a hit if you did on the left side. He replaced Luis Aparicio in Baltimore, and then he was replaced by Cal Ripken Jr. So pretty rare air company there. He was a defensive specialist. He had a 977 fielding percentage with 3,005 putouts, 5,786 assists. I mean, he was just a machine. So he was never much of a hitter, but he was a defensive machine. I'll tell you, preparing him with Brooks Robinson was special. Numbers, there's 124 sevens, 119 eights, 12 nines, and there is a 110 of Bellinger out there. It sold for $787.77 in 2016 on eBay. So not quite as much as the other 10. And this is a big one. Ooh, big score there. Number 100, Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose. All right, this was a tough card to get, not a cheap card, but I got him. And he's one of the major stars. And if you notice, he's 100. They, as I've said before, but to remind everybody, if you haven't watched the previous show, they put a lot of the major stars were round numbers. So, you know, he was 100, Bench was 250, Gibson was 450. I haven't been in the set too much that I even know the numbers. It kind of frightens me sometimes. So that's Charlie Hustle. You guys all know about him. I shouldn't have to say anything, but just to remind you, he is a major league leader in games played, plate appearances, at bats, and hits. So, and I'm not even going to get into the whole Hall of Fame debate. I know some people think he should be in, some people should be out. I just hope that they do the right thing and you know, someday and treat him right, because he was one of the best players in baseball history, in my opinion. It's not my own personal opinion. So numbers wise, it was 796 sevens, 204 eights, 13 nines, and there is 110 out there. And God, I'd love to own that 10. It sold on the PWCC auction in 2021 for $10,200. So if you have a rose that looks good somewhere, send it in to PSA for sure, or whatever your favorite grading system is. But yeah, that's one of the landmark cards in the set, obviously, and he's one of the big guys. So I was happy to get Rose. Next is Tony Conigliaro, card number 105, and you'll see a blow up of that. The real claim to fame with him is he's the brother of another Conigliaro coming up, card 114. So there is a 10 of him. There's 197 sevens, 306 eights, 39s. There's 3 10s of him. So of the 262 cards that are 10s, he's over 1% of those. See the quick math there? That's because I was a mathlete. So $1,125 it sold for on eBay in 2016. So his brother was Bobby Conigliaro, by the way. So his claim to fame was he was the youngest home run king in the American League in 60 at the time. He won the title in 65 with 32 home runs. So unfortunately, he was hitting the face, a cheek with a ball hitting like a kind of a Dickie Thon for the more modern people out there. Oh, that's not modern, but in my world it's modern. But Dickie Thon got hit in the face, kind of the same injury that Conigliaro had, and he kind of never really recovered. He did, but he was never kind of the same player. But he had some seasons after that. Here's another one. This is a Hall of Famer, Bill Mazeroski from the Pirates. He was a heck of a player. This card number 110. Once again, see, they kind of try to give those They nicknamed him the Glove by a Pirates broadcaster. He was mainly a defensive specialist. Did not hit too great, but he had a .983 fielding percentage. And he was put in the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2001. And I have a very good friend who's a Pittsburgh Pirate fan. So, Mr. G out there, that Mazeroski's for you. All right. Next, once again, this guy did nothing special, but I love the name. Card 112, Manny Mota. Who doesn't love Manny Mota? Right? There's 136 of these out there. I have one of them, and I'm happy. So, good old Manny Mota. That's just a cool name. But he did average 10 pinch hits per season. So, he was kind of one of those guys that kind of just showed up and did his job. And then, of course, as we're talking about, there's Billy. I apologize, I was wrong before. Billy Bobby. Billy Canigliaro is 114. So, there is a 10 of him. There's 129 sevens, 84 eights, 8 nines, and 110. And that sold for $1,275 on PWCC in 2015. And he was Tony's brother. And, he was just a decent player. He was All-Star Rookie of the Year. So he had some merit. But his main thing, he kind of took care of his brother. His brother was sick for like the last 3 years of his life. So Billy took care of him and saw him to the end. So that was nice. Now, here's one of the rookie cards of the set that's pretty coveted. Ted Simmons. And if you watch any baseball, you know who Ted Simmons is. And this is an 8. So this is one of those that's a little higher than the 7. The story behind this is I actually got this at a show for like nothing, and I ended up sending it into PSA, and it was an 8. So big win, because this is like a $750 card. So that's Ted Simmons. So we'll let Doug take a look at that. So there's 496 sevens. There's 347 eights. There's 21 nines. There's 110, and that's worth $2,085. Well, it was sold in 2015 on eBay. So Ted Simmons, and the story with Ted Simmons, he was one of the best catchers probably in the history of the baseball, but he always was overshadowed by Johnny Bench. He could never overcome the fact that Johnny Bench was better than him, and but I would take Ted Simmons in a heartbeat. They drafted him 10th overall. He batted higher than Bench in his career, and he had 248 home runs. He was an 8-time All-Star. He halted Bench's 9 years of starting in the All-Star game, which was kind of cool. And he won the Silver Slugger Award in 1980 when he got traded to the Brewers. So they called him Simba long before the Lion King. But that's okay. He was elected Baseball Hall of Fame in December of 2019, so he's kind of a new inductee. Then he went on to be general manager of the Pirates, and funny story, he agreed to trade Barry Bonds to the Braves. Jim Leyland threatened to quit if he did that, so obviously he didn't. So, I'm sorry, he did it, so he wanted to quit. So basically, nothing more to be said about Ted Simmons. He's one of the best catchers ever. Awesome. I'm lucky to have him in an 8, so I'm very excited to have that card. Now, this is one where I only have half of this set, but this is the checklist, all right? And there's 2 checklists, one for the basic set and one for the master set. Now, what's the difference? Well, you ask. Well, the difference is that this is card number 123. Okay, and you'll see on here, it says card at bottom right, card number at bottom right. So if you turn it over, and you'll see a picture of that above. At 123, the card is on the lower right. So that was the more popular one. That was the one after they fixed it. So the one before it, see, they put the set out in 3 sets. They did it a group during the summer, spring, summer of cards, all the way up to like 520. Then from 520 to 640, they put out later. And then the high numbers are 644 to 752, and those were conflicted with football season. So they only printed 50% of the amount of cards for those. And you've heard this before if you watch it for the first time watching it. So what they did was they tried to correct some of their mistakes as they put out the series. So in this case, clearly they must have wanted it centered because they put bottom right. I'm sorry, clearly they wanted bottom right, but they centered some. So let me give you the numbers on the centered card. So the centered card will be the same card. It'll just say card centered, card number centered. And those, and you see the difference. There's only 57 sevens of the centered, 51 eights, 1 9. So it's a very scarce card. All right, as opposed to this one, the bottom right, the more common card that was not corrected, that was corrected. 112 sevens, 105 eights, 5 9s. So there's almost twice as many graded cards in the bottom right than there is the centered. And if you want to have the master set, you have to have both of them. So I obviously have the easier one to get, the bottom right. I am in search of one of the 57 centered cards that are out there. So if anybody's got one, email me. But the point is that I need the other half of that because I'm going for the master set eventually. But I wanted to point out the difference in the checklists. So those are called variations. All right, and the final card for this group, once again, just because he was on a prolific team, card number 124, Don Gullett. Just love the name, prolific. I used to watch him as a kid. He was part of the Reds machine that won the titles. Just a heck of a pitcher, and had to bring him up. So there you go. That's cards 75 through 124. Once again, you'll see the nice tight sleeves. I use the Superior Fit Innovation sleeves. I think they're the best ones for PSA. Personally, I'd recommend them. I've tried 3 or 4 other sleeves, and while they're good, they're not quite as they don't fit as well, ironically. So thank you, everyone. I hope you got some information out of this. Hope you enjoyed it. The next show will be covering the next 50 cards, so look for that. And once again, please hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Great Card Quest.